So, boys, we're coming off a pretty damn busy weekend. As I'm sure most of you guys know, we actually had 2 regional championships taking place. One of which was the Knoxville Regional Championships here, won by none other than Toller Webb, one of the best players in the world. And of course, we had the Melbourne Regional Championships, which, your boy had the pleasure of playing in, which was won by Kieran Singh. Now, because I did play at Melbourne, I am going to touch on this one first, because obviously, one, I have a lot more experience, just being at the event. I got to, watch basically, I watched all of the top cut, or sorry, I should say, I watched all of top 8. And obviously got to talk to a lot of the players, and basically just mingle with a lot of these players. And because of that, we will touch on this one. Whereas with Knoxville, I really only got to see the top 8 matches. Because of that, while I did, get to see quite a bit of it, I do think it is, better to focus on Melbourne, since that is what, I personally had experience with. Now, Kieran obviously goes on to win the whole thing. Was fantastic to see. I was kind of rooting for Kieran, especially once Nick lost in top 8, simply because I wanted to see Roaring Moon win. This was a really cool, Roaring Moon balance team here by Kieran. We'll pull it up here. Okay, there we go. It's loaded up here. So as you guys can see here, we've got the, the Amoonguss Incin. This is kind of the Amoonguss Incin plus Ogerpon Wellspring really does kind of feel like the main core right now on balance. I do believe we saw Neil VGC run a very similar team to this. I forget if it was the exact same 6, but obviously the Ogre Water, the Incineroar, and the Amoonguss, it gives you just a fantastic Fire Water Grass core. Obviously, it gives you, Incineroar here has Fake Out. It's got the Safety Goggles as well, making you a lot better into Amoonguss. Really giving you 3 Amoonguss answers, which, can definitely be one of the biggest issues for balance, right? If a lot of your mons start going to sleep, it can definitely be problematic. Obviously, too, we got the double redirection here from Amoonguss and Ogerpon Wellspring. And Amoonguss really just giving you things like Spore and Pollen Puff as well is very good. And of course, Ogerpon Wellspring being a redirection mod that also can pump out quite a bit of damage. And Terra Water, obviously, right now is very, very good. It makes you really good into things like Fluttermane and Qian Pao. So not Qian Pao, Chi Yu. It obviously does help a bit with Qian Pao as well. But yeah, obviously helps you out a lot with those special attackers, especially too with the rise of Pokemon out there like Ting Lu. Having a water type that, terrors into a water type that can also just deal massive damage with a move like Ivy Cudgel, obviously is fantastic. And then really kind of, 2 of the key pieces for Kieran's team here was obviously one, the DD Roaring Moon here. Now, I do believe off memory, this was a tack booster Roaring Moon. I don't know exactly what the spreads would be, but normally, typically on sets like this, I do think they run pretty close to max attack, because that way, even if they get intimidated, they are still, getting the attack booster, which is definitely very important, especially too where you can use something like Dragon Nest to kind of just make up for that, right? But yeah, really, really cool, team here by Kieran. Obviously, the Choice Specs Fluttermane, just one of the best ones in the game, of course, and having the Perish Song as that final option is very cool in endgames. I don't actually know if it ever came up throughout the event, or at least I didn't see it in the top cut, or the top 8, I should say. But yeah, I didn't actually talk to Kieran about that, so I would not know. And of course, finally, the Raging Bolt with Assault Vest here. This mod, obviously, it's kind of on the rise. I did use it at this event as well. And it was just a really cool piece. It did play actually a very pivotal role in the grand final as well. Because if we do go back here and take a look here, we see Trent was actually using a Psy Spam Trick Room team. And because of that, Raging Bolt was very, very good in this matchup as well. Basically, it allowed it to tank things, right? A really cool thing as well was this was actually a Scar Final Gambit Ape. And Ape actually can't one-shot the Raging Bolt as long as it has enough HP, which I do believe Kieran's did have off memory. And because of that, it's able to sit there and fire off things like Snarls and Dracos. And really is just super annoying for a team like this, because you can't really take it out with Expanding Force. Obviously, Torkoal's not great into it either, because it's got Assault Vest and it naturally resists the fire-type moves coming out of Torkoal. So yeah, it was like super, super clutch in this matchup. Yeah, because of that, really, really cool team by Kieran here. I was super excited to see it win. Especially too, because, our playmat at the event was a Roaring Moon playmat. So, as Kieran said on Twitter, he kind of fulfilled the prophecy of the Roaring Moon. But going back over to Trent's team here, I do want to mention this because Trent is actually the first person who gave me a loss at the event. I met him in round 5. We were both 4-0 at the time. And he beat me pretty bad. I'm not going to lie. It was pretty brutal. It was without a doubt the worst matchup I had for the entire event. So to go on and see him actually, make it to the grand final was pretty cool, simply because I felt really defeated after I played him. I had not felt that outplayed in a very long time. So yeah, seeing him finish second does make me feel a little bit better about that loss. But really, this team here was it was just super interesting, right? It's Psy Spam with Sun. Really just kind of a Sun room here. Obviously the Hat and the Lilligant, the Hat and the Indeedee, I don't really feel like I need to talk about. Everyone kind of knows what it does at this point, right? They're just really, really strong at, 1, getting up Trick Room, 2, setting up terrain, and then, of course, kind of just firing off massive Expanding Forces to deal a lot of damn damage, right? And then, obviously, we had the Gallade there as well, another Psychic type as well paired up with this team. Really, really interesting tech as well, simply because Gallade in Psychic terrain also does a lot of damage. I do believe we actually saw one game where I believe Trent actually opted to not try to set up Trick Room, and as a matter of fact, he actually just started trying to fire off damage. I think there was like one game where he just straight up just went like Helping Hand with the Psycho Cutter in terrain. And yeah, just deals a lot of damage too, especially because it's a high crit move with scope lens and sharpness. I believe that puts you at like a 50% chance to crit. I could be wrong on the math for that. It's very close to like 1 in 2 or potentially 1 in 3. But yeah, it does a lot of damage. You know, when I played him too, I believe he just like one-shot my Ogerpon Water in terrain, which was kind of nutty. Especially too because my Ogerpon Water actually was quite bulky. But yeah, look, the late on this team, it's very good, right? It's got the wide gut support. It's another Trick Room setter. And of course, if you are playing very hyper-offensive team like myself, this mon under Trick Room is very slow and can kind of just run through you because it does deal quite a lot of damage. And then, of course, as what we see here, he's got the Sun mode, the Torkoal plus the Lilligant. Very, very annoying to deal with. This Lilligant, honestly, was, I'm going to call it the MVP of Trent's team. Simply because in the top 8, he was in a situation where Nick Card was probably about to win the game. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty certain Nick was about to win the game. And Lilligant just straight up just dodged the Heat Wave on 1 HP. And because of that, he was actually able to go on and remove the Ogerpon Water from Nick's side with a second close combat that it normally would not have got otherwise. So because of that, Lilligant obviously did put in work. And of course, Scarf Annihilate. I think everyone kind of knows what it does on a team like this, right? You pair it up with Indeedee, and you know you can kind of just nuke, you know, one of the I guess main threats on the opposing side on lead. This Annihilate does have base like 110 HP, I think. So there's not many mons in the game that actually do tank a final gambit coming out of this mon. So that is pretty damn impressive. And of course, even in some situations where you don't have to actually click it, I do believe in one of the games, Trent just straight up started clicking close combat. I think he actually removed the Roaring Moon on turn 1 of the game, maybe game 2, I think, the game he won. Simply because obviously they were like, okay, yeah, this is going to be like final gambit. And then I think it just close combat one-shot the moon. And yeah, it was pretty crazy. But yeah, really cool team by Trent here. Super hard to deal with, man. This is a team where you really need to be ready for Trick Room. And even if you are, the Sun mode plus like Ape is like still really damn scary, man. Diego, another guy here who was running Trick Room as well. I actually did speak to Diego a bit. He's friends with a good friend of mine, Michael, who is another Chile player. Very, very good. It was really cool to see another Roaring Moon in the top 8. Actually, in this case, it was actually in the top 4. Very different team here as well, though. This is kind of like a hybrid team to a sense here. Like, obviously, you look at it, right? It's got kind of a similar mode to, the team we just looked at, where it is obviously Side Spam, but in this case, it is Amrouge over the Hatterene. It does have the Sunsetter here with the Torkoal. But then it's Ursaluna plus, Booster Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon did not have Protect on this team, which was kind of wild to me. It was 2 attack, Taunt, and Tailwind, which I did think was very, very interesting. But nonetheless, another really, really cool variant here of the Trick Room, right? We see another Gallade, in the top 4 here. We see Armrouge here with the Psychic Seed of all things. And then Expending Force, Flamethrower, Trick Room Wildcard. Look, just another really, really cool team here as well. And we also see Skill Swap on the Indeedee, which I think, I could be wrong. I don't know if you're trying to side take any abilities off any of your teammates. It is definitely good as well if you do get an extra Torkoal, for example, and your opponent, say, sets like Rain Dance on like Tornadus. But also too as well for taking things like, off the Dondozo, for example, getting rid of its unaware and stuff like that, and giving it Psychic Terrain, which obviously at that stage too does allow you to kind of set up, say, like your Roaring Moon, right? Actually, I just realized this Roaring Moon doesn't even have DD, so that's a lie. But also too, like, I'm looking at this here, Ursaluna, no Protect, Yawn, dude. Diego was definitely cooking for this event. Really sick team though, not gonna lie, it's cool. And he actually even mentioned this to me as well. I just remember this here as well, Burning Jealousy, because we were talking about the Heat Wave miss after Nick Khan lost in top 8. And he literally said to me, he's like, yeah, this is why I've run Burning Jealousy, because it doesn't miss. He's like, I'm not going to run a Heat Wave, even though Heat Wave's like 25 base power higher, which I did actually think was kind of crazy, right? What else here? Liu's team here. This was a very interesting team. It was not something I kind of expected, right? Because you kind of see Archelodon here, but it's not on Rain. You see Gouging Fire here, and it's like, sure, it can howl up some things, but like, I don't, like, maybe this is just an Adamant Galarian Zapdos. Like, that would be my assumption, is this is just Adamant, because I don't think you would ever pair it up with Jolly. Look, I think Adamant's better anyway, right? But yeah, like, super duper interesting team here. I really am curious what the Archelodon does on this team, because like, obviously you can see here, it has opted to obviously drop, the electric move here for Snarl. It's got the Body Press, Flash Cannon, and Draco Meteor. I don't know how I feel about Flash Cannon over Heavy Slam personally, especially when you don't have the ability to boost up your special attack. But look, they made top 4, so clearly a very cool team. But just super interesting, right? You've got all these mons that, like, 4 mons in particular, these top 4 here, that all like getting buffed up by the Gouging Fire. Gouging Fire's Howl. And then, yeah, just like really, really interesting tech. Like, obviously, you see the Galarian Zapdos, you see the Urshifu here with Dark. Obviously good here. And then we see like the Plot Giraffe. Yeah, just a super interesting team. Unfortunately, I didn't really get to catch any of these games. I was focusing more on the other side of the bracket. But regardless, still a super cool team. And then Nick Khan, I kind of touched on it. Nick was my pick to win it all. Absolutely dominant day one. I think he ended up going 9-0 day one, and then I think it was 4-1 into top 8, where unfortunately he did take his second loss of the event. And really, Nick just... he got unlucky. Honestly, game one was super sick. He made some like really good plays to essentially stop the Trick Room from going up. Game two couldn't stop the Trick Room, and it did get hard. Game three basically made some like really good reads, got into a position to win, and then unfortunately Chiyu just missed a heat wave in the sun. It was crazy too because the heat wave actually did just straight up one-shot Torkoal in the sun, and of course the Lugant just decided to dodge it, which was yeah, very sad for Nick. I do feel bad for him on that because I do believe he was in a position to obviously go into the top 4. And I don't know if Nick would have actually lost, honestly, if it didn't come down to the miss. Like maybe he would have. I'm sure some of those matchups would have been a bit hard. But regardless, Nick Khan is one of the best players in Australia. And at this point, look, we've seen this team enough. It's very similar to the team I actually brought, with really the only difference being I had Raging Bolt in the Glamora slot. But yeah, look, it's just the Flutterfish, man. I love to see it. And yeah, it was really sad to see Nick go out as early as he did. But yeah, still, regardless, really sick team. We did get back-to-back Archaludon Reigns here. I'll touch on Jesse's team simply because I spoke to Jesse a lot more. Super nice guy. Had dinner with him as well after day one. And yeah, this is just what I would call a pretty standard, really Archaludon reign here. Archaludon, I think, is just like really, really good right now. And there was actually a lot of these teams that were quite successful, I believe, at this event. Quite a few of them in the top 32, I think. And yeah, like this team's really, its biggest issue was Sun. And that's kind of, what really we kind of spoke about, right? Was this team felt good into everything but like Tornadus with Sun. Pelipper could definitely position around things like Torkoal, but yeah, when you kind of just, keep clicking Sunny Day into things like Urshi, it's not the greatest, but look, regardless, still a super cool team here. We see the Archaludon, right? It's Assault Vest, it's Stamina. We see the Heavy Slam here as well, Electroshot, Draco Meteor, Body Press with the Terra Fairy. Terra Fairy is just really good, obviously, into things like, what's it called? Dark Urshifu. Of course, you've got the normal Terra, sorry, you've got your normal typing, sorry, for things like the Urshifu Rapid Strike as well. And of course, you just look at this. We see Amogus, we see Insane, just obviously the really good balance core. Urshi Rapid here obviously just pairs up incredibly well with things like Pelipper. And then, of course, Giraffe is kind of like, one, the anti-Trick Room, but also two, like, if you are going up against, a really if you're going up against a very hyper-offensive team, the ability to set your own Trick Room obviously is very, very good, especially with, threats like things like Archaludon, Incineroar, Amogus, and Pelipper, mons that aren't naturally that fast, but can still do quite a bit of work under Trick Room. And of course, finally, Pelipper. A really interesting mon, honestly. This mon it's one of those ones where its base stats are garbage. It's got decent bulk on the physical end. Its special attack stat is nothing to write home about, but Hurricane and Weather Ball in the rain, when they're both stabbed, do a lot of damn damage. So yeah, shout out to Jesse. It was really unfortunate to see him lose. I believe he actually had Kieran in the top 8 matchup, I believe it was. And I was talking to Lewis Tan, who is, very good friends with Kieran and one of the best players, in Australia. And he actually thought Jesse had a very, very good matchup. I believe he did actually play Kieran in Swiss as well and beat him 2-0 off memory. So that, I think, makes Kieran's run even more impressive. Just seeing him actually get through a team that was considered a very bad matchup for him, and especially with a player like Jesse, who was incredibly dominant at this event as well, right? So, yeah, shout out to Jesse. And yeah, very, very cool team. Final top 8 team we'll kind of touch on here, obviously, is Alex's team. This is kind of a pretty standard team, but I do want to touch on it simply because this is very similar to the team that essentially ended my run and kind of, it kind of ended my my day 2 hopes, or sorry, my top 8 hopes, I should really say. But this is just another Gouging Fire team, and this is just Gouging Fire setup, right? You got the Champ Power, the Gambit, the Ogerpon Water, the Rillaboom. These are 4 mons that absolutely love pairing up with Howl. Obviously, you got the Speed Booster to make sure you're the fastest thing on your team. And then you kind of just start saying like, hey, Rillaboom, +1 Grassy Glides are all of a sudden going to start picking up things like Fluttermane. Like Champ Power, you're already like an insanely, strong mon. If Champ Power ever gets the +1 and you don't have Intimidate, this thing just starts one-shotting everything. It gets to a point where there are Pokemon like Fluttermane who are like calc to live things like Icicle Crash coming off this mon, especially Jolly variants. And then all of a sudden you're not living anything. It's like you just straight up even die into Sucker Punches if you don't save your Terra Fairy. So yeah, like really, really cool team here. I don't really think there's that much to say about it, honestly. It is pretty standard for what you'll see like on teams like this. Obviously they've been around for quite a while. Essentially, the gist of this team is like, hey, you've got things like the Rillaboom, the Ogerpon Water, right? These like decent supports to really, kind of enable things like the King Gambit and the Gouging Fire, Chimpao to really kind of sweep. And then, of course, the last one on the team is just Fluttermane. Boys, I'm telling you right now, just slap like 5 physical mons on a team, have a little bit of support, and then just slap a Specs Fluttermane in that 6th slot. And honestly, you're good to go, right? Like that. That's all you really need, right? Just slap a Fluttermane in the 6th slot, and I'm sure you'll be right. A couple other teams here, though, like, again, you look at these things here. If you want to see, there's your boy right there. And, came in at 23rd, once again, 9 and 5, we have the Raging Bolt. A lot of really cool teams here. You see, quite a few more, like, things like Roaring Moon here kind of popping up everywhere, which was awesome to see. I'm honestly, kind of surprised with how much Roaring Moon we saw. Definitely something I'm going to consider going forward. Scott Kennedy, the best Scott in Australia, clearly. Once again, just edges me out. I believe he did the same thing at Brisbane as well, the bastard. But yeah, running the Roaring Moon plus Wheezing Core, which is pretty cool as well. Jake rocking out here with the Komodo. Jake had a really impressive run, actually, because I believe very similar to me. I think Jake was one of the people who slipped in at the 6-3. And then he managed to go 4-1 day 2, which is obviously very impressive, right? Fighting into that top 16 is always impressive. And then, of course, Toby here, one of the homies from the locals. He's the guy who ended my run, essentially, in the last round. A very, very tough matchup for me, honestly. This Raging Bolt was honestly a massive threat. I could not get through this thing for the life of me. And with Terror Electric Thunderclap next to things like, E-Speeds and Sucker Punches coming out of the Chiampao, the Rillaboom also clicking Grassy Glide. My team had a real big issue with this, I'm not going to lie. I think 2 of my 4 losses for the entire event, actually, sorry, technically 5, but that's a story for another day. But yeah, 2 of my 5 losses, I should say, were to those Gouging Fire teams, basically just essentially killing me before I could do anything, which was kind of sad. But yeah, I guess, look, if you guys want to see my team, if you didn't catch yesterday's video, that's my team. I did do a full breakdown on it yesterday, so go check that out. Yeah, really fun team, obviously, by me. And then, yeah, massive shout out, I guess, just to everyone who played this event. Honestly, shocking to see so few Blood Moon Ursalunas here, because when you see, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're like, oh, 6, like, that's a lot. I played half of them day 2. I played 3 of those 6 in my day 2 run, which was, yeah, definitely, yeah, very scary. Also, too, one thing that kind of sucked for me was I played Toby, Philip, and William all day 2, and I had a 2-1 record against them. Technically, I didn't beat Philip. Again, story for another day. But yeah, I guess, yeah, Philip and Toby beat me. William, I did actually beat William. That was a really, really good game, though. It came down to basically my Chiyu had to actually hit an overheat. But again, guys, I'll talk about my run tomorrow. If you're interested in hearing about my run, go there, because I don't want to fill this video up with it. But yeah, look, I think that's enough for Melbourne anyway. Some really, really cool teams here. We'll switch over to Knoxville as well. And I've just realized too, because we're talking about 2 events here, we'll kind of speed it up just a little bit. Obviously, Tolaweb ends up going on to win this event. Tolaweb pulling out the Golden Joe. It feels like every metagame, Golden Joe kind of drops off, and then he comes back. Golden Joe is just always going to be good. Metal Coat, plus Nasty Flood is insane. Terra Fairy on this mon, for anyone who doesn't know, is literally just Dark Urshifu. It's like, hey, please don't kill me with Wicked Blow. And then the rest of the team, you got things like the Helmet Tornadus, you see the AV Raging Bolt, which is very standard. We actually see a Citrus Berry Incin, which I have not seen as much of recently, but I do think Terra Grass on Incin is very good, and it kind of obviously helps out with things like, Amoonguss, right? You don't have to have goggles when you have something like Terra Grass. And I do think one of the more underrated things about, going Terra Grass over safety goggles is we're in a metagame where a lot of the time the Incineroars, especially on balanced teams, are paired up with the Amoonguss. And because of that, they, a lot of the time they'll use their Amoonguss or even their Roaring Moons, for example, to knock off the safety goggles and then Spore. And because of that, knockoff plus Spore into a slot is just very, very safe for a lot of these teams. And because of that, I do think Terra Grass is definitely an option worthy of looking at. Dark Urshi's Dark Urshi, and same with, Waterpawn. These 2 mons here are just insanely good in the metagame. They feel like you can honestly slap them into the last 2 slots on any team, and they'd be fantastic, right? It really feels like the same with Raging Bolt. Yeah, like this team here, while it's very standard, it is still really cool to see, because this is definitely a more interesting take, I think, on Tornadus teams in particular, because obviously Tornadus plus Urshifu was very, very good. But yeah, when you kind of start looking at these other pieces, you're like, they don't have to be on Tornadus teams, but Golden Joe, obviously, with Nasty Plot on Tornadus teams is good. And we even saw Tolla play with it as well, right? We saw him go for things like, you fake out, and then, like, you go, like, Tornadus, cycle into it, your Incineroar, you fake out Nasty Plot, cycle back into, your Tornadus on a Protect with, like, Parting Shot or a Switch, and then you basically just go, like, Tail Whip +2, make it rain, and just start sweeping through. But yeah, really cool team by Tolla here. Congratulations to him. Unfortunately for James Evans here, he was the runner-up at this event. But James, again, we see the Gouging Fire once again. Gouging Fire has actually been having some really, really good performances, honestly. And it actually, it's a mon that I don't think we actually got to see in the grand finals, and I think I would have personally liked to have seen it off memory. But look, regardless, still a really cool team here. We actually saw quite a bit of Landorus Incarnate on teams like this, where it was like Landorus Incarnate on non-Tailwind teams and non-Rain teams, which I did actually think was kind of crazy. But in saying that, in my personal experience, Raging Bolt is a massive problem right now. This one is kind of everywhere, especially with Assault Vest. And there really isn't any physical ground types running around. Obviously, we did see one of the guys from Melbourne running Scarf Great Tusk. There are the occasional Landorus Therians popping up, but I don't think that mon's that good right now. And yeah, Landorus Incarnate, though, is just, it's good, man. And you see the rest of this team here. Once again, it's like, a Gouging Fire paired up with like 3 mons that like to be howled. And then a Focus Sash Fluttermane, which I did actually think was super, super interesting. But one of the cool things, I guess, with Sash Fluttermane is it gives you, like, technically gives you some bulk. But while also still being able to deal quite a bit of damage. Because I do think that's one of the biggest issues with, in particular, timid Fluttermanes, which is kind of feels like what most people are running right now, unless you're Specs. And even then, a lot of Specs Fluttermanes are still going timid. But a lot of the time, if you aren't Specs and you are timid, it feels like you do... It's not that you do no damage, but you don't do as much as you'd like. Because of that, I do think Focus Sash actually is a very, very, very interesting, option to definitely be... that's definitely worth looking at, right? And then we have a look here, Enrique's team. Very, very standard in a sense. Obviously, we do see the double fire here coming out with the Entei. The Entei with Inner Focus plus Clear Amulet was very, very interesting, I think. A lot of people were kind of questioning it. But he did actually go on to talk about it on stream as well and just say like, hey, the Clear Amulet is for things like Gouging Fire going for Breaking Swipe. It's, for things like Incineroar going for the parting shots, right? And because of that, it actually did make a lot of sense, right? Also things like, Fluttermane's going for Icy Winds and whatnot. So obviously, while it doesn't, obviously block it, well, it does block Intimidate, but so does Inner Focus. There are a lot of moves going around, right, that do actually, kind of mess with the attack and speed stats. And because of that, I actually do think Clear Amulet did turn out to be a very, very interesting choice. Especially because, as we said, things like, Gouging Fire can definitely be a bit of a problem, right? And Gouging Fire doesn't want to, just sit in front of, this one while it's clicking Stomping Tantrums. But at the same time, right, if you ever Terra into your Fairy type, all of a sudden you're susceptible to burns coming out of the Sacred Fire, which obviously is very, very cool. And we do actually see here as well, Incin deciding to drop the knockoff on this team, which I thought was super interesting, especially because, again, it is paired with Amoonguss. And we do see Incin, Amoonguss, and Ogerpon Water, of course, paired together again. Yeah, the almighty, Fire, Water, Grass core there. It's just, look, super, super good, right? We see a Specs Fluttermane and, of course, another Giraffe here. Very reminiscent of Wolf's Giraffe, I believe, where it's the Terra Fairy Dazzle Gleam set with, Hyper Voice, Throat Spray with Protect and Trick Room, right? Very, very good. Just a pretty standard, I don't want to say it's standard. It honestly feels like these 5 here are kind of standard. And then we just got a bit of Entei Source, which, is never a bad thing, right? Luca Paz here. A very cool team by Luca. Honestly, like, looking at this team, kind of confirms something I kind of felt over the weekend. If you have a look at this team, obviously, and compare it to the team I showed you that I ran, the only difference is they actually had Landorus in the Tornadus slot. And I'm not going to lie, as much as I love Tornadus, there were a lot of matchups where I'm like, damn, Tornadus feels kind of bad. Obviously, there are a lot of matchups where Tornadus feels insanely good, especially when you pair Chiyu with Sun. But I basically didn't bring my Tornadus to day 2 at all because I played 4 straight Trick Rooms plus, a priority spam team. And because of that, I do think having something like Landorus in that last slot is very good. Especially too, because Timid Landorus paired up with Chiyu in particular is like really, really good. And it's also very nice with Fluttermane as well, because it pumps out damage, right? Like this one with Life Orb does so much damage, it's absolutely absurd. Yeah, another really cool hyper offensive team here. We do actually see Raging Bolt as well being a secondary speed control option as well. Like Electro Web plus Icy Wind is like your 2 speed control options is definitely nice. Especially too when you got 3 mons click and protect. And then of course Chiyu just being the specs monster that it is, right? Justin Tang, very unfortunate. I think Justin lost. I feel like this also too, by the way, 13-1 is record before the top 8. I'm pretty sure. I think Justin lost his first game of the event, won 13 straight, and then lost in first round of top 8, which was kind of kind of insane. But again, from Justin's team, what do we see? We see another Landorus Incarnate paired up with basically the exact same team we just saw, but instead of the Chiyu, it's actually got the the Banded Arcanine here. Which again, I think Banded Arcanine right now is actually really good as well. I think this one's like honestly insanely good. But yeah, really, really cool team here by Justin Tang. Essentially, we did just kind of talk on this team. Dropping the Gleam for Taunt as well, I thought was really interesting, but I do believe this is like a very bulky Taunt team. But yeah, just like another really cool like take on offensive teams, right? We see the Dark Urshi everywhere, right? We got the Bolt, we got the Hisuian Arcanine. Arcanine rising up, Landorus Incarnate back on the rise too. Really, really cool team there by Justin Tang. We have Kyle's team here. I feel like this team is always gonna, it's always gonna get one placement in the top 8, right? Since Stephen May used it, right? We just saw the last event. Nick had it in top 8. Now we see, you know, Carl here having it in top 8 as well. We've already spoken about it, boys. It's good. This team is just always good. Glamora next to Chiyu does so much damage. It's insane. I'm pretty sure, you know, for example, like, Glamora will always one-shot in DDs, for example, with Meteor Beam if it's on the board next to Chiyu, which is kind of nutty. Like obviously they can start calculating for it with Spadef, but the second you start putting points into Spadef on Ndidi, you've got no, you know, you've got no defense, and it's just, honestly, it's not a good sign, right? And then finally, two here, we've got two teams left, I guess, to touch on. Avery's team here, this is just one of those Tinglu plus Kamowari teams here. This is just a sick team, right? This team really does feel like it's like, hey, let's get the Kamowari going, and once it's going, nothing's stopping it, right? We see the Amoongus, you know, again, we know what it does at this point. It, you know, it spores, you know, it rage powders, it heals up its friends. Kamowari with Lefty's Overcoat, I thought was really interesting because Overcoat obviously, you know, protects it from spore, protects it from weather, which is very nice. And of course, just the Iron Defense Body Press set here with the Terra Steel plus Iron Head, obviously helping out with things like Fluttermane. We see the Fluttermane as well with the Perish. On a team like this in particular, I think is really good because you can use things like Amoongus to like essentially enable, you know, some of your more defensive pieces to deal a lot of damage. Because things like, you know, the Incineroar, things like the Tinglu, even, you know, the Porygon 2 as well, with Download plus Terra Poison can also do quite a bit of damage. Because for anyone, I guess, who doesn't know, Terra Blast does take from your highest, like, stat. So because of that, what actually ends up happening is if you get the attack boost and then you click Terra Blast, sometimes you can just get physical Terra Blast coming off this thing because all of a sudden you +1 attack. Now that becomes, you know, your primary stat, or your primary offensive stat. And especially too, when you get like the +1 and then you're firing off physical poison attacks into things like, you know, Terra Fairy Fluttermanes, all of a sudden you just start one-shotting Fluttermanes, which is very, very crazy to think about. But yeah, look, it's just a super, super cool, like, bulky team here built around kind of just getting Kamowari up and running. And honestly, once teams like this get going, they're very, very hard to deal with. They're very, very good into like teams like the Wolf team. Obviously with Lu, you do very good, especially into teams like mine. Obviously there are ways around it with things like, you know, Urshifu and of course things like Ogerpon Water. But you know, this team definitely has the tools to kind of slow those down. And really just like, it just makes things very, very hard to deal with, right? And then I guess the final team we'll talk about here for the top 8 is Nora's team. Now, why do I feel like we've basically spoken about this exact 6, honestly? More Landorus Incarnate, which is great. Seeing Urshifu Rapid as well, obviously, is still nice, because this one kind of fell off. But seeing it, you know, still getting good placements, obviously, is very nice. But, yeah, look, this is just a super standard team. I don't really feel like I need to say too much about it. Is there anything in particular here? I guess, like, we can look at Len's team, because this was, like, definitely one of the more interesting teams of the weekend, which is kind of crazy, because I guess Daniel Walker's team was also interesting, too. Maybe we'll look at that after this one. But this is like Corviknight Sand. Corviknight does feel like a really good like anti-meta pick right now. But it is still kind of crazy to see Len essentially bubble, because if you have a look here, Len did actually go 11-3. So he actually does bubble out of the top 8 here, being I think the only 11-3 was it? Okay, actually, there's 3 of them too. Joseph Ugarte, my guy, also kind of bubbling out of the top 8 there. But yeah, dude, like this is just such an interesting team, man. Like you got like obviously everyone knows what the Lycanroc does, right? It's Sash Endeavor. It's really annoying, especially in sand. Corviknight's just like, hey, I'm the Tailwind guy. I'm the Brave Bird Body Press guy with Roost. You know, he basically just sticks around for a long time. You don't want to intimidate it. You know, you don't want to Icy Wind it. You don't want to snarl it, stuff like that. It can be very, very, you know, dangerous, especially for things like, you know, obviously like the Raging Bolt. If this switches in on a snarl and then just like reflects it, it's kind of nutty. I am bundled. This one feels like a super good anti-meta threat. And seeing Terra flying on it, I did think was actually kind of crazy. It is really, really cool to see though. And then, of course, you know, we got the AV T-Tar with Terra Grass, Terra Blast. We got the Choice Specs Golden Joe here with, you know, the Terra Water. And, of course, the Sand Veil Garchomp with Substitute. This is just one of those cheesy win cons, right? You kind of just get up the sub, you know, your opponent starts missing and you just start firing off Earthquakes, right? And, you know, when you got things like Protect, you got things like, you know, Corviknight that's off the ground. All of a sudden, this mon can just become a massive, massive threat. But yeah, a really cool team by Len there. And I guess as well, I'll quickly pull up Alex Walker's team. Where is it? Because that was one of the most interesting teams. James Sullivan as well, actually. This is another cool team as well. I played him at the locals. Really, really cool team here, the way he used the Zoroark, which is, yeah, really cool. Even Shane here as well. I lost to this team. This was my second loss of the event. I lost to Pachirisu, guys. Yeah, kind of feels bad. But here it is, Daniel Walker's team. I'm just going to show you guys this kind of as a way to end the video, I guess. Actually, we still got usage stats to look at. I lied. But Daniel Walker, absolutely cooking. We have the Terrifier Ogerpon, you know, that is what it is, right? We got the Tatsugiri plus Don Dozo, but it's not what you think it is. This is Covered Cloak, right? It's Commander, it's still Commander, don't worry. But this is Covered Cloak, Terra Grass, Draco Hydro Pump, Nasty plot taunt. I mean, look, Walker is known for cooking up some sauce, but my god, this was saucy. We look at the Dondozo here. This is Terra Fairy Assault Vest Dondozo with 4 attack. You know, Waterfall, Earthquake, Heavy Slam, Rock Slide. Again, Walker absolutely cooking. We see the Cresselia here with, he's got the skill swap on the Crest as well, which I did think was super interesting. From what I've heard, apparently he would skill swap the Overquill and give it the Levitate ability, which is like, why? So I think he may have done the same thing with Raging Bolt. I don't know the mechanic though. But Calm Mind Bolt as well with Terra Fairy lefties, super sick. And then just this here, the Overquill. Like, this guy actually pulled Overquill, right? He, like, Citrus Berry, Intimidate, Barb Barrage, Toxic Spikes, Taunt, and Curse. Walker absolutely cooking. And I'm sure most of you are going to be like, hey, yeah, Scott, but he, like, went 6-3. It's not that impressive. Walker, I believe, lost his Cresselia round 1. I don't know if he actually got this back. I'll give you guys the brief rundown on what actually happened to Walker's Crest, because I do think it's hilarious. Basically, you know, Walker in round 1 apparently Terra poisoned his Cresselia. His opponent instantly flagged it, you know, calls over the judge like, hey, team sheet here says Terra Fairy. It was Terra poison, right? So whatever, Walker gets an auto loss game 1. But the judge, you know, being gracious was like, hey, I'll let you change the Terra. Walker's then like, hey, I actually don't have the, you know, the Terra shards for Terra poison. You know, is what it is. I don't know if it was the guy next to him or if it was one of his friends or something from what I've heard. But basically, like, I believe it was mid-round. Someone was like, hey, trade me the Crest. I'll make it Terra Poison for you. Walker's like, bet. Then he goes to trade his Crest. He gets a Mimikyu in return. And he goes to whoever it was like, hey, is this you? And the person says, that's not me. Walker just traded his Cresselia to some random searching for the code 2 from what I understand. Which is freaking hilarious. Now, I've got no idea if he actually ever got his Cresselia back. I don't know if he played the entire tournament with 5 Mons. I don't know if he played half the tournament with 5 Mons. I honestly don't know how it is. But honestly, that was freaking hilarious. And the fact that I believe he also lost round 1, and obviously got a game loss round 1, could have definitely changed his entire event. He honestly could have 7-2'd. Walker is an incredibly talented player. And while this team looks super janky, if anyone's going to pull it off, it's him. But yeah, so I guess that's the story on Walker there. But yeah, I don't really know if there's like too much else I want to kind of go into here. Boxy boosted going 10-4, very PogChamp. You know, he pulled out the Iron Jugulus here. Lawsy pulling out the, he pulled out the Gadget Fire. Jumping ahead of myself, Lawsy pulled out the Iron Jugulus. You know, we see another Iron Jugulus here. It is kind of picking up a bit, which is very, very interesting to see. But yeah, that's kind of like it, I guess, for the teams. I might quickly just pull up the usage stats, and then we'll call it a day there. So now, unfortunately, it turns out we don't actually have the Melbourne regional stats in the top 12 format, at least like this, simply because we don't get streams. TCPI hates us, but we do see here day 1. Vladimaine's the king. Ogerpon, you know, it's the queen. You know, these guys are number 1 and 2. They have been for, you know, a little bit now. You know, I think people were saying like they're best friends, like these two girls dominating the meta, blah blah blah. I don't know what it is. Incin getting close to 40% usage again. Incin's back. You know, it dropped off for a bit. It's back. I do believe I saw people predicting that as well. Incin would kind of drop off for the first couple of events. It'll be back. I mean, it's Incin, right? It's one of the best fire types in the game. Definitely has competition for it, but you know, Intimidate plus Fake Out plus Parting Shot plus like beating Psy Spam it's always a good thing, right? Taunt continues its dominance as the best talent setter in the game. The Urshis are going back and forth. You know, they're both incredibly good right now. Giraffe still somehow sits at 25%. I don't know why. Priority Spam's dropped off. Boys, stop playing it. Giraffe literally does nothing to the top 6 Mons outside of blocking Fake Out from Incineroar. But at that point, who cares? It's just going to knock you off and just, you know, chunk your HP. Rillaboom, the Rise of Rillaboom, this Mon is still good. It is without a doubt one of the best grass types in the game. Grassy Glide plus Fake Out, you know, plus Grassy Terrain really. It's just good. Woodhammer also just does ridiculous amounts of damage. The Shroom, obviously, you know, on the rise still. This Mon is always going to be good. It's really hard for me to see Amoonguss ever, you know, entirely dropping off. Assault vs Raging Bolt, obviously still on the rise, and I believe it even rises up quite a lot more in day 2. Chen Power, surprisingly, is on, you know, it's kind of falling off. I do kind of blame the you know, the rise, I guess, of, you know, the Giraffe, for, you know, this Mon dropping off quite a bit. But I do expect Giraffe to drop off because I honestly think this Mon is, you know, pretty overrated right now. And because of that, I do think it will slowly fall off. But Catching Fire, it cracked the top 12, boys. Now, I'm not surprised. I thought this Mon was good from day 1. I felt like its toolkit was way too good to ever be bad. I know people did kind of, you know, shit on this Mon saying like, hey, it's just a bad Mon. It's really not. It's incredibly bulky. It has access to Howl. It's got a good enough speed stat to abuse it with booster energy. Its signature ability is, signature move, I should say, is broken. It has access to things like Breaking Swipe and Heat Crash. Honestly, it's just a fantastic mon, right? It's really good. But then we see day 2. It does actually rise up into the 10th spot. We see Chien-Pao still sitting around number 11. We see Golden Joe make its first appearance. We see the Giraffe, drop all the way down to 19%. And then really, the only major differences here, no Urshi Water. We got the Urshi single on the rise. Raging Bolt on the rise. Landorus Eye just makes a massive comeback. And yeah, guys, that's really it, I guess. Let me know down below what you think of, the usage stats. Landorus Eye and Golden Joe popping up is pretty cool. But yeah, that's basically it for this one, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.